talk to anybody in the medical world about endurance training for seniors, you'll hear the same tired advice. Just move more. And it's not working. Today, 77% of Americans don't exercise. And even for the 23% that do, this sort of vague advice may be putting you on the fast track to losing your independence and missing out long term. You may not notice it right away, but it shows up in little ways, like feeling like you can't quite keep up with your grandkids, or maybe that next family wedding you attend, you need to sit down instead of going out on the dance floor. Or maybe it's that vacation with your extended family and everyone goes on an outing and you decide to stay behind because you don't feel like you can keep up. And then one day, instead of going home after a visit to the hospital, you're going to a rehab facility. All because of your endurance. And really because no one gave you a clear plan of how to build endurance today that's gonna last for life. So in today's video, we're gonna give you that plan, the roadmap towards good endurance. We're gonna talk about what endurance actually means for you and physiologically. We're gonna talk about what the research says about endurance training and the endurance benefits in terms of longevity. And then finally, we're gonna put it all together in a weekly plan that you can implement starting today. The truth is you can still have incredible endurance even at the age of 72, but you need to train differently than you did when you were 22 to build the endurance that you want to have for life. So what is endurance? When most people think of endurance, they think of training for a marathon, riding their bike for a century, or long duration cardio activities. And if you're the person who's training for a marathon or riding your bike 100 miles, good for you, keep it up. But really what endurance means is being able to stick with the task long enough to see it through to completion. And the task is relevant to you. It's whatever is important to you in your life. Now imagine this, it's 10 years in the future and you're out gardening or walking with your family and you're not the one that needs to sit down. In fact, you're the one who's leading the walk or leading the charge. Having good endurance is about having energy, good energy that enables you to do the things that you want to do all day long. Now, physiologically, endurance is about two things. Number one, how well your body can deliver oxygen to your tissues. And number two, how well those tissues can utilize that oxygen to produce output, to actually make you physically do the things that you want. And the better you are at both, the higher your endurance is and the longer you can stay active and independent. Now, right now, as you're watching this video, your body's using about 300 milliliters of oxygen every single minute just to keep you alive. Now, if you were to jump up and start running around your block, your body would shift gears and you'd begin using about 3,000 milliliters of oxygen per minute, a 10-fold increase. Real endurance is about having enough capacity to do the things that you want to do. So is endurance important for longevity? So early in the video, I bashed on non-specific exercise recommendations like move more. But the research does actually show that doing something is better than nothing at all. Studies show that going from nothing at all to just 12 minutes a day of walking can reduce your risk of dying by as much as 14%. 12 minutes. That's less time than most people spend scrolling through the news on their phone each day, and it can lead to a 14% reduction in risk. And it gets even better. Research shows that those who exercise consistently can add as much as a decade to their life. It's that powerful. And one of the most important predictors of how long you'll live isn't your blood pressure or your cholesterol or even if you smoke or not. It's your VO2 max or your body's theoretical capacity to produce oxygen. It's that important. In fact, having a low VO2 max or poor cardiovascular fitness is more dangerous than smoking. Those who smoke have a 40% increased risk of death. Those who are cardiovascularly unfit or who have a low VO2 max have twice the risk of death compared to someone who's fit. So to make sense of this, if you're someone who has a low VO2 max, you are more likely to die compared to someone who's fit than if you'd been smoking for decades. It's that dangerous and serious. Now, if you're watching this video, you're probably not the person who needs to be told that endurance exercise is important. You're probably the person who wants to know exactly which type of endurance exercise is best for you and how to program it into your life. And that's exactly what we're going to get into next. When I was wrestling in high school and college and bike racing, I thought that every single workout that I did needed to totally crush me. If I wasn't leaving the gym or stepping off my bike and feeling completely depleted, I thought I was doing something wrong. But over time, I started to see some patterns that just didn't add up. Even in my early 20s, I was feeling chronically tired all the time. I kept getting these recurrent colds, and I needed caffeine just to stay awake in my classes. I even saw high-level endurance athletes, ultra-marathoners, cyclists, who were putting in crazy amounts of time on the road or on their bike, and they were constantly injured, always kind of sick, and to be honest, they didn't look all that healthy. And then a friend of mine, her dad was doing a 200-mile bike ride and had a heart attack while on the ride. And I started reading about it and found out this is not all that uncommon. In fact, these people that do ultra high volume and mileage endurance exercise can actually do damage to their heart. And it turns out there's science behind this. Overtraining can actually be detrimental. One of the hallmark studies is on training volume and the risk of getting an upper respiratory tract infection, or the common cold. And this fantastic study shows this U-shaped curve. People that don't train very much at all, or sedentary people, are very high likelihood to get the common cold. People that train a lot are also high likelihood to get a cold, compared to people that train moderately or appropriately are at the lowest likelihood to get the common cold. And this sort of U-shaped curve is not just specific to the common cold. It can also be applied to stress hormone release or injury risk. Other studies have shown that autopsies done on endurance athletes show myocardial fibrosis, or scarring of the heart, because they've done so much work that it's literally led to damage of their heart muscle over time. So with all this, I started to dive into the research on endurance training, and I came across a guy named Phil Maffetone. Maffetone worked with elite endurance athletes. We're talking people running 5-minute miles for 50 miles in a row, and he got incredible results from them simply by telling them to slow down. He developed something called the Maffetone Formula, or the MAF formula, and it's a metric he used to estimate the heart rate at which you transition from burning mostly fat for fuel to burning carbohydrates for fuel. And it goes like this: you take the number 180 and subtract your age from that number. So if you're 60 years old, 180 minus your age, 60, gives us 120. So any exercise done above 120 will theoretically shift you into burning more carbohydrates for fuel than fat for fuel. This sort of training methodology is crucial for endurance performance. When you use mostly fat for fuel, you're tapping into a virtually unlimited store of energy within the body, and you're not overly stressing your body by tapping into carbohydrates for fuel and causing undue inflammation and stress on your system. When I first tried training like this on my bike, I thought there's no way this can be right. I was pedaling up my local cycling hill and I couldn't keep my heart rate under the threshold, even while pedaling as slowly as possible. But I dutifully tried it for months, and something crazy happened. My endurance performance started to increase. Pretty quickly, I was able to ride up that same hill while keeping my heart rate under the threshold. And when I did want to push myself hard, like when I'm racing my friends up the hill, I had a lot more gas in my tank. And that's when it clicked for me. Training easy builds your engine much better than training hard every single day. This is when I came across the work of Dr. Peter Attia. He's a physician who trains endurance athletes, special forces operators, and people who want to live with peak performance into their 80s and 90s. What Attia and others have found is that the best athletes in the world, and those who live the longest, don't do most of their training going all out. They spend most of their time building a big aerobic base, a huge engine under the hood. The key to building this big aerobic base is a very specific type of training called Zone 2 training. Research done in 2018 by Milan and Brooks showed that zone 2 training optimizes something called mitochondrial biogenesis. This means your cells create more better functioning mitochondria, which are your body's energy factories within your cells. As a side note, mitochondrial dysfunction is actually one of the hallmarks of just about every chronic disease that Americans suffer with today. Regular zone 2 training cues your body to burn fat for fuel and has been shown to lower inflammatory markers. So how do you know if you're training in zone 2 or using the 180-age Maffetone formula? Well, you're gonna wanna get yourself a device to measure your heart rate. Now, there's numerous devices out there. The gold standard, in my opinion, is the chest strap. I'll link this in the description below. This is my Garmin chest strap. I think this thing's fantastic. I saw it on Amazon recently for like 60 bucks. You can also use a watch. I have an Oura ring that tracks heart rate. And when I compare my Oura ring heart rate to my chest strap, it's quite significantly different, especially on high heart rate activities like a bike ride. The Oura ring just doesn't pick up the quick spikes in heart rate that you see out on the bike. So you really need something that's actually gonna track it. And the wrist one, it's okay, but it's certainly not as good as the chest strap. The chest strap's just, it's so close to your heart. It's got lots of different electrodes that pick up on heart rate, and that's what I'd recommend getting. So what's the difference between zone 2 and the Maffetone formula? Well, zone 2 is 60 to 70% of your theoretical maximum heart rate. To find your theoretical maximum heart rate, you're gonna take 220 and subtract your age. So if you're 60 years old, 220 minus 60 is 160. 60% of 160 is about 96 beats per minute, and 70% is 112 beats per minute. So you're gonna wanna keep your heart rate between 96 and 112 to be in zone 2. Now, the Maffetone formula, you're gonna take 180 and subtract your age from that, which 180 minus, let's say 60 again, means your heart rate needs to stay below 120. So typically, Maffetone training allows you to go a little bit higher than zone 2 training. So if you were gonna pick one of them, I would start with the Maffetone formula because it's gonna be pretty tough to stay in zone 2. But the reality is anything within that range, so for a 60-year-old, anything within the range of 96 to about 120, it's gonna be a good place to train at. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. And if you don't have a heart rate monitor, you can always use the talk test to know that you're probably in zone 2. You should be able to carry on a full conversation or even sing a song without having too much issue. Zone 2 training should feel really easy. So I hear this all the time from people. Dr. Matt, I can hit a maximum heart rate when I'm out on my bike or running that's higher than 220 minus my age. And here's the thing, your predicted max heart rate is just that. It's a prediction of maximum heart rate. And it's not perfect. Research shows that maximum heart rates can vary by as much as 20 beats per minute based on individuality. However, 80% of the variation in maximum heart rates comes from age. So as you age, your maximum heart rate will go down as indicated by this graph here. But hey, maybe you're the exception to this rule, and I'm sure you're gonna tell us about it in the comments below. The other thing I hear from folks is that if they were to use the Maffetone formula and train at 180 minus their age, it'd be far too easy. And that's the point. Training should feel easy, and you should basically build yourself up so that you can train harder and harder, faster and faster on your bike, or faster and faster with running at that low heart rate. You wanna build that big engine. The point of your workouts is not for them to feel hard, it's for them to be effective. And the workout program that we're about to lay out for you is about being effective and getting you the results that you want, not feeling hard. In fact, research studies done on 10 to 12 weeks of zone 2 training strictly showed that athletes could increase their aerobic endurance by 10 to 15%, all without doing a single hard workout. And when it comes to training, our goal is not to do workouts that feel difficult. It's to do workouts that are gonna get you the results that you want, all while staying safe and avoiding things like overtraining, injury, or creating scarring in your heart tissue because you do so much high volume training. One of the other things I love about endurance training is that it often gets us outside. Now, when I train in the gym, I'm usually inside, exposed to artificial light, and these human bodies of ours love to be outside connected to nature. There's a new health trend called forest bathing, and people have been doing it for millennia. It simply involves getting outside and getting connected to nature, specifically in a forest. And research shows that a few hours of spending time in nature can reduce cortisol levels and blood pressure by as much as 15%. And sunlight exposure stimulates vitamin D production and balances our circadian rhythm, both promoting health. So if possible, try to do your endurance-based exercise, your zone 2 training outside, even better if you can get into nature. All right, finally, let's talk about high intensity interval training. This should be the cherry on top of your training, not the main entree. So a lot of folks will do really high volumes of pretty high heart rate training for hours per week. And that's where you get into some of those dangerous effects we talked about earlier. When in reality, high intensity interval training should be very intense, but very short. We're talking 20, 30-second bursts, a total volume of maybe 10 to 15 minutes per week. A 2018 study found that small amounts of high-intensity interval training stimulated mitochondrial biogenesis, which we talked about earlier, similarly to steady-state training. And finally, let's get into our practical plan for endurance training for seniors. A while back, we made one of our most popular videos ever on endurance training versus strength training for seniors, talking about which one is actually more important. And the short answer to the question is strength training. Strength training is the most important form of exercise for a senior. The long answer to the question is do both. You need both strength and endurance training if you want to be maximally healthy. However, research from the 1980s by Robert Hickson showed us that strength training and endurance training can actually interfere with one another. In other words, the pathways within the body that are activated with strength training can be turned off when you do endurance training and vice versa. However, research after that showed us that when you do those types of exercise can have a big impact on which benefits you gain. One of the best things you can do is to do your strength and endurance training on different days. Research also shows that the higher intensity your endurance training, the more of an interference effect you get on your strength training. So if you want to optimize your strength and endurance, here's a plan to make it happen. So now we're going to talk about a plan for an ideal week of training that incorporates both endurance and strength training in a way that's backed by research to be maximally effective for you. So here's a bird's eye view of what a typical training week should look like. If you want the PDF of our weekly plan, click the link in the description below, enter your email, and we will deliver it direct to your inbox for free. First, you're gonna wanna have a high volume of low level movement. You should be getting 7,000 to 10,000 plus steps per day. Now, if you have an active job or just an active lifestyle where you're gardening, doing chores, moving, great. If not, you're gonna actually have to pepper in some walking throughout your day to get to that 7,000 to 10,000 plus number. The second thing you're gonna wanna do is cardiovascular endurance training in zone 2 or using the Maffetone 180 minus age formula. You're gonna wanna do 3 45-minute plus workouts per week. I'd recommend doing these on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Ideally, outside, like we talked about, with a heart rate monitor on so you know exactly what heart rate range you're in. Then you're gonna do 3 full body strength training sessions on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. These are on different days than your zone 2 training. You're gonna wanna make sure that you have as little chance as possible of interfering your strength training workouts from your endurance training workouts. Now, finally, we're gonna do some high intensity interval training. You're gonna do these on the same days as your cardio zone 2 training workouts. Let's do them on Tuesday and Saturday, for example's sake. And you can do these at the same time as your zone 2 training workouts. Just do them at the end, kind of stacked onto the back. Now, there's a million different ways to do high intensity intervals. One of the simplest is just to do 30 seconds high intensity sprinting and then 30 seconds of recovery. So if you're riding your bike, you pedal as hard as you can for 30 seconds and then go really easy for 30 seconds. Repeat that 5 to 10 times and call it good for your interval endurance training. So in the end, endurance training is not about training as hard as you can or completely crushing yourself. It's about training smarter, training better to get the results you want, and be able to do the things you want to do for decades to come. Until next time, I'm Dr. Matt. Happy training.